sitting on a mushroom, doing a sound check, 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 check. Kind of like a ghost. Ooh, is that a spider? Hi! I'm so glad you're here. Over the past couple of years, I've scurried around thrift stores, garage sales, rummage sales, yard sales, all of the sales, in order to find and collect as many cotton fabrics that fit the same sort of color scheme, vibe, because I want to make a nice patchwork skirt. Now, I've done patchwork before. My apron is patchwork, using scraps from my scrap bin, and I also made this Sally-inspired outfit, which the idea was that if she had been made from my scrap bin, this is what she would wear. However, both failed in a very similar way. I did not use the same type of fabric, the same kind of weave, and therefore they've both fallen apart. Now the apron's not a big deal, it can be messy, it's an apron. The dress, however, I never really wear because there's a hole on the chest, and that's not ideal. So I knew I'd want to try it again at some point, and when I was recently adding some more fabrics to my little stash behind me, I thought, I think I finally have enough to make something. So I think it's finally time to make my patchwork skirt. However, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to make. I've been picturing a skirt in my head, but another apron would also be really cute, more in the style of like an apron dress, not really so much for a practical apron use, but also because an apron dress would be cute, just a dress would also be very cute. And so then I didn't know what to do. And then I thought, why choose? Why can't we have all three at the same time? A patchwork skirt is the main goal here. So that is rule number one, that it's going to be a patchwork skirt. Whatever we add to it to make it a 3-in-1 apron slash dress slash skirt remains to be seen, because I don't actually know what I'm gonna do. Yeah, I don't have a plan. So before we move any further, let's go plan something out. All right, let's see what we can put together. The first most important piece is a patchwork skirt. So we'll call that Form 1 since we'll hopefully be transforming it into 2 other garments. To make this an apron, we really only need to add a flap to the front with ties that go around the neck and ties that go around the waist. When worn, it should look like an apron slash pinafore type thing, even if the skirt does go all the way around. Now, to make it a dress, we need a back flap. And to keep it up, we'll add ties to the top that join with the ties in the front to make some straps, and I think I'll add some little flaps to the sides as well to join the front and back bodice pieces together, and then the apron waist tie can still be used too. That seems like it should work. Let's try it out. Taking this little pile of fabric out to actually use it feels so strange, since I've had it for so long, but it's time to cut into every single piece. After adding some green scraps from my Gibson girl dress and the leftovers from my living room curtains, I had 15 different fabrics to use. I started by ironing every single piece, and then it was time to do some math. I know what you're thinking. Ironing and math? No, I have not been body swapped. Using my waist measurement and the desired height, I calculated how long each tier of a 3-tiered skirt should be, something like waist times 1.5 for the first, times 2 for the second, and times 2.5 for the third. Then I divided those numbers by 15 to see how wide each piece had to be, and then divided the length of the skirt by 3 to see how tall they needed to be. Each piece had to be about 12 inches tall, and I ended up changing the width of the pieces, so I don't really remember how wide they ended up being. Once I had the pieces cut for each tier, I then cut all of those in half to make even smaller patches. Then I laid out every single square, tossing fabric squares out like a card dealer to create a nice looking pattern, mixing and matching to make sure I didn't layer similar colors too closely. Once I had a pattern I liked, I clipped them all together and started sewing. To help keep each seam consistent, I taped a sticky note to my sewing machine to help guide me as I stitched each square together. This was a huge help throughout this entire process because I used it with nearly every seam on this project. By the end of the first night, I had the entire first tier done. The next day I cut the second tier pieces in half and became a Vegas card dealer once again. I felt like I had this process pretty well in hand. It was so repetitive that there wasn't really a lot of room for error. At least, not with the sewing. Filming this video was going so well, until I sat down to film a bit where I'm like thinking about what to work on next, and I stared at my camera screen for the first time in 24 hours, and it was at this moment that I realized everything I had filmed the entire day had been in slow motion.
A few minutes later.
I don't know how this happened because I had to Google how to fix it. After fixing that, I started on the waistband using some scraps I had from cutting out the skirt pieces and sewed them together in whatever order just kind of looked right. I decided to keep patchworking the actual pattern pieces together first before putting them all together in their final form. So I laid out the pieces for the front and back flaps and sewed those together. I had to do some mental gymnastics to figure out what order everything needed to be attached, and realized I needed to make all of the different ties before I could attach the lining to the bodice pieces. And there are so many ties! Ties for the straps, ties for the waist, and I even made ties to keep the side flaps together, sliding my tweezers all the way to the bottom to turn all the corners out. The waist tie had to be sewn on top of the side flap pieces in the front so that they could be tucked away when in apron form, and I did have to seam rip and reattach them a few times to get it right, only to find out that my waist ties were not the same size, but it's fine. As I was clipping the side ties into place, I realized that the waist tie could just hold it all together, so I decided not to add them in the end. After all the straps were in place and the lining was attached, the bodice pieces were done, so it was time to put the skirt together. Aside from immediately messing up on the waist, putting the skirt together wasn't as difficult as I was expecting it to be. I was really only dreading the gathering process with all of these seams between the patches, but I just clipped the pieces together very generally and gathered it by hand as I went along. I added some 1-inch elastic to the waistband and sewed it closed by hand, and then to make hemming easier, I was going to use my serger to protect the raw edge, but instead I used my sewing machine to do a zigzag stitch because earlier my serger threads immediately broke when I tried to protect the raw edges of the skirt pieces. And now you might ask, after all of that, did you actually hem the skirt? I simply added a lace trim from my stash to cover it up, and that laughing clip that I just played originally had sound, and this brings me to my next technological blunder. My camera didn't record any sound for the rest of this filming process until I recorded the outro, and yet again, I have no idea what series of buttons I pressed to make that happen because the only ones I ever press are the power button and the record button. But I promise, there were no more mistakes. Okay, I did forget to add pockets once again, but beside that, everything was put together, so it's time for the reveal. I did it. I did the darn thing, and my 3-in-1 plan actually worked. I'm just as shocked as you are. To go from dress to apron, all I had to do was untie the straps and the waist, and tuck the back part of the bodice into the skirt. Now I also have to tie the back straps together because they're a little bit longer than the skirt, so this helps to prevent them from hanging out of the bottom. Then you just tie the front straps up behind your neck, tuck in the flaps on the sides, retie the waist, and there's the apron version. To make it a skirt, you once again tie the straps together to prevent them from hanging out of the bottom. And this time we'll do that to the waist ties as well. And then tuck everything into the skirt, making sure you indeed have everything tucked away. And because everything tucked away adds a little bit of bulk under the skirt, I like wearing it sideways. That way the bulk is where my hips are, giving it a nice fun shape. And there you have it. Typically, when I go a little overboard with whatever I'm planning, something tends to not work out, but you know what? Everything worked out this time, and it's cute. Makes me feel like a milkmaid when I wear it. And I have a feeling I'm gonna be wearing it a lot. You wanna come up on my yap? No, sassy pants. Why are you so sass? I did take some extra time to make some accessories. I made a hair tie, a hair bow, a bandana for me, and a bandana for Pearl. Because you're such a sweet baby. Would you like to go, do you need to drink some more water? Okay, my love, go! You can't do zoomies right now! You're making too much noise! Are you zooming? Somebody has the zoomies, so I'm sorry if you hear background noise. I was a little worried about the precision of it all, cutting everything the same size and putting it with the same seam allowance, but taping a guide to my sewing machine helped a lot with that, and overall it all lined up, well, almost perfectly. And it was kind of nice doing such a repetitive action, just sewing squares together. I think there are a few things that could use a little fixing. The ties are very long, so I have to tie them up when they get tucked into the skirt. So maybe those could have been a little bit shorter, but I kind of like the dramatic bow, so. The biggest thing I think needs fixing is the flaps that I added on the side so it can be worn like a dress. I don't know that they were necessary. The idea was that I wouldn't have to wear a blouse or anything underneath it to wear it as a dress, and the flaps would act like the bottom of the armhole, but the front flaps and the back don't exactly line up very well, and are covered by the waist tie anyway, so I don't think that the flaps were necessary in the end, but I think since they're there, what I'll do is add some hook and eye clasps to both of them. That way they don't shift as much, because right now they shift underneath the waist tie. So I think that'll fix that problem. I am a little worried about it fraying and coming apart because I did not finish any of the edges of any of these pieces because that would have that would have taken such a long time. And like I said earlier, when I tried to finish the edges of the long skirt panels, my serger thread broke. So that wasn't an option to finish the edge of the skirt because there was no way I was going to hem this. We all know how I feel about hemming. I did use a zigzag stitch, which worked pretty well across the board, and somehow my sewing machine performed way better than the serger with all of the seams, which I didn't expect because my sewing machine gives me way more problems than my serger ever has. So that was a little surprising, but enough about the things I would fix because there's not much. There isn't much. I think it's adorable. I love how versatile it is. I love that my plan worked. I love the fabrics that I've been collecting over the years finally coming together. I love it. I love it so much. And if you do too, you can let me know by hitting the like button. And if you want to see what I'm doing next and join the channel, hit the subscribe button. And if you want to know when I post, hit the notification bell. And YouTube and YouTube will let you know. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!